For more on this, we're joined by Professor Danny Bradlow. He's a senior research fellow at the Centre for Advancement of Scholarship at the University of Pretoria. Professor, thank you so much for speaking to us on South Africa tonight. So I want to look a little bit about the formation of Brics. So Brazil, Russia, India and China were touted to become leading global economic powers. They decided to cooperate to enhance their standing, and thus Brics was born. And then they invited South Africa to join them in 2010. Why? What do we have to contribute to Brics?
Well, I think they wanted to add an African voice to Brics, and we were the logical choice at the time for adding. We were the most leading country. We were a member of the G20. We had good relations with all the Brics countries. We were participating in an arrangement with Brazil and India. So it made sense to invite us. And it served our interests as well to be there.
Now, given the aim of Brics to reform global economic governance, what are some of the specific benefits to South Africa of being a member?
So, I mean, as the minister said, the need to reform global governance is clear. The arrangements were set up after the Second World War to respond to the power relations in the world at the time, and that's changed dramatically. So there's a need to change that. It needs to become more responsive to the concerns of the majority of people around the world, and that would benefit us as well. So if the leading institutions in the world, like the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, became more democratic, more voice was given to developing countries, to the global south, to Africa, that would be in our interest as well. And all that could happen. It hasn't happened since Brics was formed, but that is still the important agenda. I should add that Brics have formed two institutions to try and address some of that on their own. And that is a benefit, potentially, and in principle, not necessarily always in practice.
So we know that a number of countries in the global south have also expressed interest in joining Brics. But are there any downsides of being a member?
I don't know if they're downsides per se, but what is potentially a problem is that the Brics themselves have tensions within them. So, for example, China and India have a lot of tensions. They've had skirmishes on the border between them. In the economic area, India has imposed some sanctions or blocked some Chinese companies from investing in India. So there's some tensions there. It's a complicated arrangement. So it also raises questions about relations with other countries. And it's in that sense, and of course now with the war in Ukraine, the situation with Russia creates important challenges for South Africa in particular as the host this year. But for all the Brics member countries are having a problem with the situation in Ukraine.
With this restructuring of global governance, the West is pitted pretty much against the other major power, China, and along with them, Russia. And as a member of Brics, South Africa finds itself smack bang in between these large powers. Given the pressures and what we stand to benefit from being a member of Brics, it's very important that South Africa navigates the current situation very carefully to make sure that, we don't lose out on our relationship with the West. They're currently still one of our strongest trade partners. But at the same time, we maintain our position in Brics. What would be a diplomatically smart way of handling the situation, specifically with Russian President Vladimir Putin?
Well, the problem with, the smart way, I think, is to maintain a non-aligned position, to maintain a position, as the minister said, that the war in Ukraine is an important issue, but it's not the only important issue in the world. The questions of poverty and climate change are more important in many ways. The challenge for South Africa now is the fact that President Putin has been indicted by the International Criminal Court as a war criminal and needs to be, or they would like to put him on trial. South Africa, as a signatory to the International Criminal Court, has an obligation to arrest President Putin if he should come to South Africa. That obviously puts South Africa, as the host of the upcoming Brics summit, in a very difficult position. We've exacerbated that position by the way we've dealt with our relationship with Russia, having joint military maneuvers with Russia, or naval maneuvers, allowing the Lady R to dock at Simonstown, and we know goods were loaded on and off, but the government has not been forthcoming in what goods were loaded onto the ship, in sending military personnel to Russia. All of that complicates the situation now and makes it much harder to deal with the situation with President Putin. And there are not many good options open to South Africa, but it has to work out a way through that if it wants to maintain its credibility, both within the Brics and within the world more generally.
Is there a way that we can satisfy both parties, or are we going to end up inevitably stepping on someone's toes, big toes that probably don't want to be stepped on?
I think we should assume Russia is not going to be particularly helpful. It sees itself as a great power and that its president should be able to go wherever he wants. And that probably means they're not going to tell us till the last minute whether President Putin will come or not. It is possible, and probably the easy way out is to make the whole summit virtual and to say everybody will participate from their home country, and so that it's not necessary for President Putin to come here, and then we're off the hook. That makes the most sense. There has been some talk of moving the summit. That looks, I think, makes us look bad. It would be much better, and the least bad option would be to do this virtually. We could have made this an easy step by announcing that we were doing that a long time ago, but it's better to do that later rather than not do it at all. If President Putin does come here, it's going to place us, as we know from when President al-Bashir came here before and was supposed to be arrested, that we will look very bad. It will not be consistent with South African law not to arrest him, or at least there would be a difficult situation, and our international obligation is clear that we would have to arrest him if he were here.
Now, we've got to look at the long-term picture as well. We've got to manage the situation carefully and position ourselves early enough in preparation for the G20 summit in 2025, right? What are those dynamics?
So we are scheduled to be the host, and therefore the president, in a sense, or the leading country in the G20 in 2025, which seems like a long way off. But the way the G20 works is that each year the meeting is managed by a troika, and the troika consists of the future host, the current host, and the past host. And that means next year, when Brazil becomes the host for the G20, we would join the troika as the future host for 2025. And so in order to take advantage of that opportunity, in order to make sure that we are remembered as an effective host of the G20, we need to start thinking now about how do we want to prioritize our interests when we join the troika next year.
Thank you so much for those insights. We're going to see how this situation continues to play out in the lead up to August. It seems like it's 2 months away, but I think there's a lot going to happen in the next 2 months around this situation. Thank you very much for your time. That was Professor Danny Bradlow from the University of Pretoria.